On the outskirts of a large forest in Norway, a backpacker named Eric travels alone in search of shelter, and when he notices that the sky is about to darken, he decides to spend the night in his tent. During the night, the man tries to resist the pain, and while trying to contain himself, he hears a strange noise. Confused, the survivor goes outside, where he encounters a fire spreading through the trees around his camp. Sometime later, Eric wakes up in his tent again and notices that even though several hours have passed, the flames have not spread very far. At that moment, the man decides to check his leg, which is even worse due to the severity of his injuries. After a few hours of walking through the area, Eric arrives at a small town, where he enters a pharmacy to get some medicine. Now that he has everything he needs, the man goes to the bathroom at a gas station and bandages his wounds. Soon after, the survivor uses the scissors he stole from the pharmacy to cut his hair, and leaves, being the target of jokes from a group of young people. Despite this, Eric decides to continue his journey and walks away, but halfway there, he is spotted by the group of delinquents. Realizing that the man is alone, the young people decide to tease him, but the man just yells at them not to come near him and keeps walking. This attitude infuriates one of the delinquents, and he sets out to confront Eric, who is pushed to the ground. Trying to avoid the worst, the man says he will burn if he touches him again, but the lunatic ignores him and tries to hold him. In a few seconds, the young man ends up paralyzed, and suddenly, something happens to his body, causing him to fall to the ground lifeless. In a panic, the other members of the group scream around the boy, while Eric tries to get away as quickly as possible. At dusk, the man tries to hide in the streets of the city, but ends up being found by the police, who decide to arrest him. The next day, at one of the city's police stations, psychologist Christine is summoned to talk to Eric, who is in one of the cells. In addition to being responsible for mysteriously ending the young man's life, the prisoner seems to have a connection to a forest fire that occurred a few years ago, where 5 innocent people lost their lives. The police officer also explains that Eric has not said a word since he arrived there, and asks Christine to try to get some information out of him. So, the woman tries to interact with the man, who is startled when he notices someone approaching. Trying to calm him down, Christine asks him to sit down next to her, and after a few seconds, the prisoner manages to follow the psychologist's lead. To continue the conversation, the woman asks him what happened last night, and although reluctant, Eric begins to explain. He says he had no intention of hurting the young man, but as soon as he started being attacked, he had no way to stop him. While the conversation takes place in the interrogation room, police officer Henrik goes to meet the boy's parents and hugs the victim's mother to comfort her. At that moment, the boy's father asks the police officer to take him to Eric, as he wants to look into the eyes of the person responsible for taking his son's life. However, Henrik tells him that this will not be possible, as they are still interrogating the suspect to find out how the attack occurred. The couple then leaves the police station, and at the same time, one of the officers approaches his colleague, saying that the crime unit is bringing an American from the embassy who wants to take Eric out of the country. Meanwhile, Christine asks one of the police officers to remove the prisoner's handcuffs, which calms him down now that his hands are free. Now that the situation is more under control, the woman asks if the man has any connection to the fire at the Ardell farm, and he asks if there were any survivors that day. Christine then replies that only Eric was able to get out of there alive, and asks him to explain how he caused all that destruction. To demonstrate his abilities, the man places his hand just above the glass of water and controls the liquid with his supernatural powers. This scene impresses the woman, but she says that, although inexplicable, those powers could not have caused the destruction on the farm. Upon hearing this, Eric stands up, and after placing his hands on the table surface, he begins to incinerate the furniture, leaving the psychologist frightened. As he is using all his powers again, the man begins to collapse, and the instability of his head causes the fire to get out of control once more. As a result, several flaming cracks begin to open up between the walls of the room, and all electronic devices short-circuit. Frightened, Christine asks Eric to stop all this, but he explains that he can't do that, and she concludes that those powers are connected to his emotions. At that moment, one of the lights suddenly bursts, causing the man to panic and throw himself to the floor for protection. The psychologist then realizes that it is Eric's emotions that are causing his powers to spiral out of control, and decides to warn him about it, asking him to try to empty his mind to contain the flames. Despite the difficulties, the man manages to concentrate, and the destruction of the police station is halted. At the same time, a helicopter lands right in front of the police station, where Cora and her men appear to take Eric back to America. Confused, Christine says that the group can't do that, but Henrik signals for his colleague to just agree. Cora then reveals that they have brought a sedative to use on Eric and asks him to use it on himself. Minutes later, the team takes the man to the helicopter and leaves while being watched by the police. During the trip, the paramedic notices that the sedative is wearing off, and everyone becomes concerned when they realize that Eric is starting to wake up. Realizing that the man is becoming desperate, Cora tries to calm him down, but without success, and he enters a state of complete panic. Terrified, the team tries to use another sedative on the man, and at that moment, the woman notices that a huge storm is forming around the helicopter. In a panic, Eric screams for them to release him immediately, and at the same time, a powerful lightning bolt strikes the aircraft, hitting almost everyone on board. At the last second, Cora manages to save herself from the electric shock, and after the attack, the aircraft ends up shutting down. As a result, the helicopter begins to fall, and despite trying to stabilize it in every way possible, the pilot is unable to prevent the crash. As a result, the aircraft ends up crashing into a lake between the mountains, and Eric wakes up with the bodies of the crew floating around him. Quickly, the man uses his powers, being able to breathe underwater, and after melting the metal of the belts that imprisoned him, he opens the helicopter door. Before leaving, Eric decides to carry Cora to the surface and performs CPR to revive her. Hours later, several units arrive at the scene to rescue the pair and search for the crew that drowned after the crash. However, while talking to one of his fellow officers, Henrique discovers that Cora and Eric have not been found, and tries to understand why they fled. At home, Christine follows the situation on the news, and when she notices that it is the helicopter Eric was in, she decides to go out and look for him. Before she can leave in her vehicle, the woman is surprised by the mutant and approaches him to check if he is okay. At that moment, the pair hear police cars approaching the neighborhood, and Christine decides to take the man in her car so they can find out what is happening before he is arrested again. During the trip, the woman stops at a pharmacy to buy some medicine, and while waiting in the vehicle, Eric hears the police sirens. This increases the young man's anxiety, causing his powers to begin to manifest again. As soon as she gets in the car, Christine has difficulty breathing, and Eric quickly runs across the street to stop his powers from affecting the psychologist. After that, the pair flee the scene, and during the trip, the woman tries to understand how the mutant is able to manifest those powers. Hours later, they arrive at a cabin, and Christine prepares to treat Eric's injuries, which include severe burns. Realizing that the psychologist is about to touch him, the man asks her not to do so, as he does not want to hurt her. So Eric starts dressing his own wounds, and sometime later, Christine receives a call from her friend, who scolds her for helping a criminal. In addition, the woman asks the psychologist to take the man back to the police. These statements make Christine thoughtful, and realizing that her friend is right, she goes to Eric and tells him she needs to take him back. Although he does not like that decision, the man agrees with the psychologist, and on the way to the vehicle, the pair notice that it is starting to rain. Before getting into the car, Eric calls out to Christine, who turns to hug him. Thanks to this, a kind of air bubble appears around the pair, preventing them from getting wet. Eric explains that he didn't want the rain to get his friend wet, and realizing that the man is not a bad person, Christine gives up on taking him back. The woman says she no longer wants to leave, and together they drive toward the farm while listening to the news on the car radio. Hours later, the fugitives cross a ferry, and when Christine notices that her cell phone is receiving another call, she gets angry and throws the device into the water. Later, the woman stops at a convenience store to buy some food, but when she realizes that the news is showing their faces, she decides to leave. However, before they can leave, she realizes that Eric is no longer in the vehicle and runs to find him. As soon as she finds her friend paralyzed in the middle of the parking lot, Christine tries to get his attention, saying they need to leave immediately. So, the pair quickly leave the gas station, without even noticing that they have been spotted by one of the drivers. During the trip, Eric explains that he is having some hallucinations, where he sees nothing but an open, empty field, along with a sky with a different color. In addition, the man says that his senses seem to be even more sensitive in this alternate plane, causing him to feel much more heat and cold than normal. At that moment, Christine hears a police car approaching, and quickly accelerates in search of a place to hide. Realizing that one of the bridges has been blocked by the authorities, the psychologist decides to take another route, but in doing so, she encounters a huge truck. In a hurry, Christine tries to overtake the vehicle, but in doing so, they are surprised by another car, forcing the woman to maneuver to prevent an accident. Thanks to the chaos of that situation, Eric ends up getting scared, causing his powers to spiral out of control, and the vehicle to be electrocuted. This electric shock destroys all parts of the car, and upon seeing the fugitives leaving the vehicle, the truck driver runs to ask if they are okay. Without wasting any time, Christine lies, saying that Eric is her boyfriend and that he is extremely ill, so he needs to be taken to the hospital immediately. Although reluctant, the man decides to give the pair a ride, and minutes later, Henrique arrives at the scene of the accident with Cora. The woman explains that they must prevent Eric from crossing the bridge, even if they have to be aggressive to stop him. After passing through a long tunnel, the fugitives finally reach the bridge, where several police cars begin to block the entrances and exits. Noticing that Eric is restless, the truck driver asks if the ambush is meant for him, but the young man remains completely silent, and the driver decides to leave his vehicle. The driver quickly runs toward the squad, who take him away from there safely. Noticing that the police are already approaching the truck, Eric says he wishes things had been different. After that, the young man goes outside, where he raises his hands to surrender, but Christine refuses to allow this and runs to confront the police. However, the woman is easily knocked down and has her body pressed against the ground, causing Eric to fly into a rage. The mutant then orders the soldiers to release her immediately, but they do not listen to him and continue to immobilize the woman. Because of this, a huge storm begins to form around the bridge, and Cora is concerned about those giant clouds approaching. In addition, large electrical discharges are suddenly created inside these clouds, which shoot a powerful lightning bolt toward the bridge. Before he can react, Eric is struck by lightning, causing him to fall to the ground stunned. Concerned, Christine runs to see if he is okay, and as he tries to get up, the mutant notices that his hands are carrying a huge electrical charge. Soon after, a powerful lightning bolt forms in front of Eric, causing the storm to become even more aggressive. With that, everyone takes a step back, and with all the chaos, the young man begins to collapse once again. However, Christine is not frightened by the situation, and noticing that the bridge cables may be about to break, she tries to help Eric. The problem is that the police are still walking towards the mutant, and to end it all, the woman yells at him to try to control himself, just as he did the last few times. Eric then begins to concentrate and raises his hands to take control of the electrical discharges. Thanks to this, the mutant manages to manipulate the lightning around him, and as he stands up, he conjures a powerful barrier made up of the storm's lightning bolts. This scene leaves everyone fascinated by Eric's level of power, who begins to have his body extremely wounded from using so much power. After that, the clouds begin to dissipate, and the man falls to the ground, already without strength. Desperate, Christine runs to help her friend and screams for help from the police. Henrique quickly approaches the scene in his patrol car and promises to get the couple out of there. While Eric and Christine are taken to a nearby hospital, Cora talks to her superior on the phone and says that when the population finds out about the existence of a human being with powers, widespread panic could ensue. As such, the woman receives new orders from her boss and guarantees that she will carry them out as best she can. Sometime later, Eric wakes up in an ambulance in front of the hospital, but his injuries are very serious, and before the paramedics can help him, his heart stops beating. However, the doctors manage to bring the young man back to life, and he wakes up in the middle of an MRI scan. In order to complete the tests, Christine asks him to remain calm and asks him what he saw while he was unconscious. Eric then explains that he was in a very cold place, as if he had ended up in the Ice Age, thousands of years ago. Interested in learning more about this, Henrique does some research in the library books, and during the exam, Eric begins to feel frightened by the noises of the machine. Because of this, electrical discharges are triggered from the mutant's body, causing the hospital to lose power and go into a state of emergency. The doctors quickly rush to remove Eric from the machine, and at that moment, one of the nurses appears screaming for help, as one of the younger patients in the ICU has suffered cardiac arrest. Realizing that the hospital will not have power for the defibrillators, the mutant decides to walk towards the ICU so he can help the patient. However, halfway there, he is surprised by Bjorn, the father of the young man attacked by the mutant days ago. In a rage, the man claims that Eric is nothing but a monster who took his son's life in a cowardly manner. At the same time, Christine appears, and trying to calm him down, Eric apologizes for what he did and explains that he would never have hurt the young man on purpose. In addition, the mutant says he can save the boy's life right now, but for that to happen, the man must let him go. Soon after, Henrique appears and begs Bjorn not to shoot, as he will regret this action as soon as he pulls the trigger. Despite his anger, the man decides to spare the mutant, and without wasting any time, Eric goes to help the patient, while Henrique hugs his friend. Upon arriving in the ICU room, Eric approaches the unconscious boy and places his hand on his body, where he begins to concentrate a large amount of energy. Seconds later, the mutant discharges all this energy at once, bringing the boy back to life in an instant. Overjoyed, the child's parents hug him, and now that the situation is under control, Eric goes outside, where he is met by a crowd watching him through the railings. Confused, the young man decides to approach the people, who reach out their hands toward him, and in an act of gratitude, he shakes some of their hands. After that, Eric and Christine leave with Henrique, who hands them the book he used to research the mutants' powers. The group then discovers that Eric may be none other than one of the sons of Thor, one of the Norse gods defeated during Ragnarok. Before the destruction of the Norse pantheon, Thor left his sons on a protected farm in Asgard so that they could continue his lineage. So Henrique drives to Ardal Farm, which is being protected by military forces. Upon arriving at the location, the trio finds the house that was burned down by Eric and approaches it to investigate, while the mutant removes all the bandages from his body. As soon as he enters the destroyed house, the man ends up with his body pinned to the floor and screams for his friends to help him get out of there. Quickly, the pair pulls Eric away, and as he approaches, Henrique finds a kind of trapdoor with Nordic runes and decides to investigate it. Minutes later, a large military squad begins to surround the farm, and several snipers take up positions to try to eliminate the target if the situation gets out of control. While Eric and Christine wait outside, Henrique gets help from an excavator to open the trapdoor. After descending through the opening, the group comes across a huge cave filled with Nordic rune stones. Soon after, the team finds a strange tree attached to the wall and realizes that it is Yggdrasil, the world tree. At that moment, the group finds a large dusty crate and decides to let Eric climb down to it. Henrique then explains that his friend will have the help of the diggers when he wants to open the old chest, but asks him to warn them before using his powers, so that no one gets hurt. After analyzing Yggdrasil for some time, Eric goes to the crate and asks the men to open it with their tools. Upon doing so, the young man comes across a kind of ancient net, and when he removes it, he finds a leather glove, along with a belt. Believing that there may be more things inside, Eric removes the rest of the dust, revealing a hammer that was hidden beneath all the other objects. Curious to know what those items are capable of, the young man puts them on his body, and as soon as he comes into contact with the mutant, the hammer Mjolnir creates a storm in the skies, which strikes him with lightning. However, the electrical discharge does not affect Eric, as he is being protected by his weapon. Concerned, Christine asks him to return to the surface, and when they encounter the young man holding Mjolnir, people approach to observe him. When they meet again, the couple rushes to embrace each other, but Cora refuses to let Eric go free and orders her soldiers to shoot. However, Christine is the one who ends up being hit, causing the woman to be eliminated right in front of Eric, who begins to scream desperately. Enraged, Thor's son conjures a gigantic storm that protects him from the shots while he uses Mjolnir to conjure powerful lightning bolts. Thanks to this, dozens of people are instantly eliminated, and in a final attack, Eric conjures a dome of lightning that destroys everything for miles around. Whether Thor's son escaped that ambush and got his revenge against humanity remains a mystery. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.